Hello YouTube, once again, this is Zack, and we are starting on our third video, our third lesson in this series called Crash Course in Music Theory. Last time we talked about intervals. If you don't know what the crap those are, then you should probably go figure that out. Now we are going to take those intervals and use them to build chords. Also, fun fact, I noticed that in the last two lessons I didn't actually use any sound. It was just me talking. I didn't give you any audible examples of anything. So we are going to incorporate some sound in today's lesson. I know that's very exciting. So, here we go. This lesson will be divided into two sections, triads and sevenths. We'll start with triads. Triads are a group of three notes that can be arranged in thirds. So let me give you an example. If you take a C and an E and a G, that is a triad. It's a kind of triad because from C to E is a third, and from E to G is a third. So we have three notes that can be arranged in stacks that can be stacked into thirds, and we call that a triad. Notice, and this is no extra charge, but this is just fun. If you go from C to G, it's not a sixth, it's a fifth. Isn't that fantastic? So from C to E is a third, from E to G is a third, from C to G is a fifth, because in music, 3 plus 3 equals 5. Wonderful. So you could also call these chords. So that chord that I just showed you, that triad that I just showed you, you could call that a chord, but a chord is a more broad term. A chord is any group of three or more notes, whereas a triad is a specific kind of chord. But the phrases, for example, D major chord and D major triad are essentially interchangeable, and I'm sure that I'll be using both of them more or less interchangeably in this lesson. So keep that in mind. D major chord, D major triad, C major chord, C major triad, who cares? So let's take a look at the example that I just gave you. We had C and E and G. The distance from C to E is 4 half steps. The distance from E to G is 3 half steps. They are both kinds of thirds because C, D, E, 1, 2, 3, that's a third. E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, that's a third. But one is 4 half steps and one is 3 half steps. So the one that is 4 half steps is a major third, and the one that is 3 half steps is a minor third. And if you watched the interval lesson, then you would know that very well. Anyway, so we have a minor third stacked on top of a major third. The one on bottom is minor, the one on top is major. Top being higher notes, bottom being lower notes. Anyway, that is the formula for a major triad, or a major chord. So to get a major triad, you pick a note, then you go up a major third from that note, you get the next note, then you go up a minor third from that note to get the next note. You can think about it this way, but I actually think there's an easier way to think about it. So let's take that first note. We're going to call that the root note. And then we're going to go up a major third to get the next note. We'll call that the third. That's why it's called the third, because you go up a third from the root note. But then instead of thinking about the next third up as being a third above the third, that gets a little tricky and a little complex. Let's think about that as being a fifth above the root, because that note is actually typically referred to as the fifth. So you have the root, the third, and the fifth. You have the root, which is the note that you start with. You have the third, which is a major third above the root. And then you have the fifth, which is a perfect fifth above the root. And that is the formula for a major triad or major chord. Another example, maybe an E flat major chord. So you start with E flat, you go up a major third, and that would get you to G. And then you can go up either another minor third, or you can start from E flat and go up a perfect fifth. Either way, that will get you to B flat. So you have E flat, G, and B flat. And those are the notes of an E flat major chord. It's called an E flat major chord because the root note is an E flat. Just like the other chord was called a C major chord because the root note was a C. So this is what a C major chord sounds like. This is what an E flat major chord sounds like. These are usually written with just capital letters. So if you're looking at something like a chord sheet or something, and you just see a C, a capital C, or a capital E and a B and a flat sign, then that refers to a C or E flat major chord or major triad, depending on how you want to think about it. In general, we typically say that these sound kind of happy, Like they're happier, they're more cheery, they're more cheerful, happier. I don't know however the crap to say it than the other chords that we're going to learn about. Right now, that probably seems a bit arbitrary, but you'll understand what I'm talking about when we compare them to the other ones. But before we do that, let me take a moment to remind you that if you are benefiting from these videos, you should totally go down and subscribe and like and comment and share things on Facebook and Instagram and get me famous, because these videos take forever to make, and I would love to know if people actually give a crap about them. Okay, moving on. Now, let's take a look at the minor triad. For the minor triad, you take a note, and then you go up a minor third, not a major third, but a minor third above that. So you take a note, go up a minor third, take that note, and then go up from that note a major third. So the major triad was a minor third on top of a major third. The minor triad is a major third on top of a minor third. Or we can think about it like this. You take the root note, you go up a minor third from the root note, and then you go up a perfect fifth from the root note. So our example, we'll start with C. We'll do the C minor triad. You start with C, that's your root note. You go up a minor third from C to get E flat. When we went up a major third, it was E. Now we're going up a minor third to get E flat. And then you go up a perfect fifth from C, from the root note, and you get G. Notice that the fifth is the same. The only difference between a C major and a C minor triad is the third. The C major has an E, and the C minor has an E flat. So when you take the middle note, the third of a major chord, and you flatten it meaning you lower it by 1/2 step. That means you create a minor chord of that same root note. The root and the fifth stay the same. Let's do another example. Let's say you want to make an E flat minor chord. You start with E flat, go up a minor third to G flat, then you can go up a major third from G flat to get B flat, or to make it a little simpler, you could go up from the root a perfect fifth to get B flat. So the notes of an E flat minor triad would be E flat, G flat, and B flat. This is what a C minor chord or a C minor triad sounds like. This is an E flat minor chord or minor triad. Minor chords are typically written with capital letters and a lowercase m right next to them. Some people in some situations also use lowercase letters to be minor and capital letters to be major. That's how they represent them. You'll typically see that more in like in the key when someone's saying what the key a song is in, and you might not know what that means right now. Just keep it in mind. It's something to think about. Typically, a capital letter on like a chord chart or something means a major chord, and then a capital letter with a lowercase m next to it means a minor chord. These typically sound a little more sad. I don't really know how else to say it. Dreary, I don't know. They're not as cheery or happy as the major chord. To help you understand that, here is a C major chord followed by a C minor chord. C major, C minor. Now for our last triad, we're going to learn the diminished triad. The diminished triad consists of two minor thirds stacked on top of each other. Or you could think about it as a root of the note that is a minor third above that, and the note that is a diminished fifth above that. So if we wanted to do, for example, C diminished, you would start with C, you would go up a minor third to get E flat. So that's your root and your third. In order to get your fifth, you could go up a minor third from E flat, that would get you to G flat, or you could think about it as going up a diminished fifth from the root, which would be going from C to, once again, G flat. So the notes of a C diminished triad are C, E flat, and G flat. Say, for example, we wanted to do an E flat diminished chord. You would start with your E flat, go up a minor third to G flat, and then you could either think about it as going up another minor third or going up a diminished fifth from the root. Either way, you arrive at what you could call B double flat, also known as A. That's how we talk about it on the streets. Anywho, to understand the relationships between these three triads, let's talk about it like this. You start with a major chord, root, third, fifth, root, major third, perfect fifth. When you lower the third, you go from a major chord to a minor chord. When you lower that fifth, when you lower the fifth of a minor chord, you go from a minor chord to a diminished chord. So lower the third, you get a minor. Lower the fifth of the minor, you get a diminished chord. That's how they relate to one another. So this is what a C diminished chord sounds like. This is an E flat diminished chord. If it helps, you can think about diminished chords as maybe sounding, I don't know, scary. So I will now play a C major, a C minor, and a C diminished back to back so you can hear the change from happy to sad to scary. If these words don't help at all, then just completely forget about them, but I think they might be helpful to some. So happy, sad, scary. Here we go. So now we're moving on from triads to sevenths. So just as with triads, you can stack third intervals to get a root, a third, and a fifth. You can stack another third on top of the fifth to get a seventh. What do I mean? So say we're going to start with C. You go from C to E. That's one third. Then you go from E to G. That's another third. That gives you a root, a third, and a fifth. Say we want to go from that fifth, that G, up another third. You get G, A, B. 1, 2, 3, G, A, B. So we have some kind of B getting added to the top. That is another third, and that gives you the seventh, because the distance from C to B is going to be some kind of seventh. So now we have root, third, fifth, and seventh. The third can be major, which means that it is 11 half steps above the root, or it can be minor, which means that it is 10 half steps above the root, or it can be diminished, which means that it is 9 half steps above the root. And of course, you all know this perfectly because you all watched the last video. Anywho, when you add a major seventh to a major triad, you get a major seventh chord. For example, a C major triad consists of C, E, and G. We know that really well. But you can add a B to the top of it to get a C major seventh chord. C major 7 chord. They're usually written like C and a capital M and a 7. And if you ever get into jazz circles, they often represent this kind of harmony with a triangle for some strange reason. Anywho, the distance from G to B, from the fifth to the seventh, is a major third. The distance from the root to the seventh is a major seventh. That's what's most important, is the major seventh. So we have a major seventh being added to a major triad. That is a major seventh chord. This is what a C major seventh sounds like. The only word I can think to describe this is maybe, pretty? I don't know. Anywho. Next, when you add a minor seventh to a major chord, you get what is usually called a dominant chord. Example, our major triad is C, E, G. If you add a seventh that is 10 half steps above C, aka B flat, you get what is typically referred to as a C dominant chord. This is typically written with a C, a capital C, and a 7 next to it. Your theory professor might want you to call it a C major minor 7, but in all reality, even he just calls it a C7 when no one is listening. This is what a C7 sounds like. Maybe a good word for this is like strong. I don't know. I don't know what to really call this. We're getting into some obscure territory here. Let's keep going. When you add a minor seventh to a minor chord, you get a minor seventh chord. Example, we know a C minor triad is C, E flat, and G. If you add the minor seventh that we just added to the C major triad, if you add that same minor seventh to the C minor triad, you get a C minor 7. So you would have C, E flat, G, and B flat, because the distance between C and B flat is a minor seventh. Minor sevenths are typically written with a capital letter, a lowercase m, and a 7. And sometimes your jazz people, because they like to be different, use a dash. So it'd be like C. I don't know if they'd use like dash 7 or just C dash. It doesn't really matter. It's all, you just have to kind of know what the crap people are talking about. So this is what a C minor 7 sounds like. It's still sad, but it has a little more complexity than just a minor chord. I don't know, it has a little more something. I don't know, there's something else going on. It's not just sad. It's I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. Let's keep going. When you add a minor seventh to a diminished triad, you get a half diminished chord. Example, you start with a C diminished triad. What is that? C, E flat, G flat. We know that well. And then you add that minor seventh, which would be the B flat. We've done that twice now. And you get a C, E flat, G flat, B flat. We'll call that a C half diminished. It's written a bunch of different ways. One of the most common, at least in more traditional circles, would be to have a C and then a degree sign with a slash through it. You might also see it referred to as a C, what is that? C minor flat 5. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. So this is what a half diminished chord sounds like. I have absolutely no idea how to describe it. That's just what it sounds like. So, last chord. When you add a diminished seventh to a diminished chord, you get a fully diminished chord. Notice that when you add a minor seventh to a diminished chord, it is called a half diminished. Why? Because the seventh isn't diminished. The seventh is minor. When the seventh becomes diminished and you add a diminished seventh to a diminished chord, you get a fully diminished chord. They were really creative when they came up with that name. So, let's give an example. We'll start with our diminished triad, which would be C, E flat, and G, and then you're going to add a diminished seventh. What is a diminished seventh? Well, it's going to be a diminished seventh above the root. It's going to be a seventh above the root, so it's going to be some kind of B, because C, D, E, F, G, A, B, that's 7, and it's going to consist of 9 half steps. What does that look like? Well, you could just know that it's the one before B flat, because we know that B flat is the minor, so you lower that by a half step to get the diminished. So that would actually be B double flat. Because the theory professors don't like it when you say A, because they like to ruin our lives. Or you could count up by half steps, start with C, count up 9 half steps. You get C, C sharp, that's 1, D, that's 2, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. So it ends on A. That's the note that you're looking for. We have to refer to it as a B of some kind, so we're going to refer to it as a B double flat so that the theory professors can sleep at night. And that leaves us with C, E flat, G flat, B double flat, or A, if you really want to get crazy. Typically, in traditional settings, these will be written with a degree sign. So the letter, the root note, a degree sign without a slash, and then a 7 usually. And it doesn't have the slash. That means it's fully diminished. When it has the slash, that means it's half diminished, because the slash means half, because you're slashing it in half, right? You'll think about that. You'll remember that. Anywho, this is what a fully diminished chord sounds like. And once again, I have nothing for sound. It sounds like a fully diminished chord. So now, just for fun, so that you can kind of compare them to one another, I'm going to run through all of the chords that we've learned in this video with the root note starting at C. So here's a C major chord, a C major triad. C minor triad. C diminished triad. C major seventh chord. C dominant seventh chord. C minor seventh chord. A C half diminished chord. And a C fully diminished chord. Well, that's it. That's all we're doing today. Those are all of the triads and seventh chords that we are learning today. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. In our next lesson, we will be learning about all of these chords, triads, and seventh chords that occur naturally within a given scale, and how you can use those to kind of start writing songs, because that's the goal, to get out and start using this stuff, right? Right. Okay. Well, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.